teenager is a very recent invention in human history. Biologically, the period of time between childhood and adulthood is relatively short and quite defined. But the increasing cultural complexity of our world has stretched this life stage that we call youth, so that now it's not only longer, but the beginning and end of it are much more ambiguous. So very few of us are going to have a kind of rite of passage experience where we enter as a child and then emerge, ta-da, a full-fledged adult in the eyes of society. Now, as mind-boggling as this extended in-betweenness can be, there's a real advantage to the adaptability that accompanies this stage. And consequently, an absolutely vital role that youth generations play in communities. So, it's okay that youth lasts so long. I know, it's easy for me to say. I don't have a 20-something living in my basement. It's okay that youth lasts so long because there is so much work to be done by young people. And that work is all about authenticity. Sustaining and creating authenticity. We can collect just a few clues about the nature of this work, even by looking at popular culture icons of American youth. So, for example, take James Dean and his portrayal of the rebel without a cause in 1954. Arguably, this is probably the first American icon of youth. If you check out that lower corner of the poster, it says, "And they both came from good families." Now, this reflects a real kind of moral panic at the time about teen deviance. But from the point of view of the protagonists of the film, these young people, this phrase and the title of the film itself are sarcastic. Sure, their families do appear to be the model of success. They're the very image of what the middle-class, suburban, American nuclear family is supposed to look like. But actually, they're failing to serve even the most basic purpose of the human family, to fulfill even the most basic needs of their sons and daughters. Now, far from rejecting these families that are failing them, these young people desperately try to help their parents to serve their needs. And sometimes this is interpreted as rebellion. But from their point of view, what more noble cause could there be than that of raising oneself up, and that of improving your family? But ultimately, their parents are content. They're satisfied, mimicking the image of a good family instead of adapting to the actual needs of their sons and daughters. And so the young people resort to creating a kind of family among themselves. And we see this in future films as well. For example, a punk classic by Penelope Spheris called Suburbia. And as viewers, at the end of these films, we leave wondering whether these pretend families that young people have improvised for each other aren't actually more authentic than the real families into which they were born. But let's leap ahead to the counterculture of the 1960s and 70s so we can check out two more icons of American youth. This is Easy Rider. The famous tagline is on the top of this movie poster: "A man went looking for America and couldn't find it anywhere." What's going on there? Are they just geographically challenged in these primitive pre-GPS times? Are they simply too high to locate themselves within the United States of America? Then perhaps the impetus for this road trip is an opportunity to transport drugs across the United States. But no, the reason this journey is so challenging is because they are seeking the real America. And it's a road trip because they not only want to find it, to settle upon the idea in their own mind, they want to go there. So along their journey, they meet all sorts of people who reject them because they don't appear to be the American norm. But from their own perspective, they are exemplifying the American virtue of freedom. And their journey is all about discovering the real America, as subtly indicated by the one guy who calls himself Captain America, with the American flag emblazoned on his jacket and his bike and his helmet, and the other guy who's named for a famous American cowboy, wearing a Native American necklace, a frontiersman coat, and something like a cowboy hat. Now, while it's all about finding the authentic America, by the end of the movie, even our hero is starting to doubt himself. He wonders whether he blew it. whether the materialistic aspect of the drug trafficking undermined the search for authenticity. And interestingly, I think we even experience echoes of this same question, this idealism next to self-doubt, when we reflect on the counterculture today. We maybe could have anticipated it by looking at television commercials that were happening at the time. Here we have a Woodstock-esque field, beautiful, diverse young people converging on a hilltop to raise their voices in praise of the real thing. And as viewers, we buy it. That this is a genuinely inspiring, a genuinely inspired generation. And yet we do register just a little bit of doubt about whether ultimately the authenticity has been undermined and this generation will sell out. So, can't talk about youth culture without talking about urban youth culture and hip hop, where everybody knows that the mantra is keeping it real. Exactly. This whole idea of keeping it real is so charged that, for example, in 1996, on the day after Tupac Shakur was killed, the Washington Post ran an article with the headline, "A death as real as it gets." That's intense, right? So this article is probing just a few questions that are part of a multifaceted, vibrant, vital conversation about authenticity. Conversation that asks questions like, is the kind of violence exemplified by Shakur's death, is that the kind of real stuff anyone really wants to be keeping? If an artist from the street makes it big, are they still real after they become rich and famous? Can an upper middle class white tween from Boulder, Colorado have a real, meaningful experience with gangster rap? Can a feminist hip-hop artist recording on her iPhone from her homeland in Papua New Guinea be as authentic as Grandmaster Flash or Tupac Shakur? These are questions of interest not only to quirky anthropologists, but they engage and confound us in our own living rooms, in our dorm rooms, in our churches, on our streets, and of course, in art itself. So, authenticity. Big deal for youth culture. So what? So I am very fortunate because I get to work with young people all the time and observe them and how their passion for authenticity plays out in very real ways in their everyday life. And from this, I have learned so many lessons and have time to share with you just briefly my favorite few. First, I've come to really appreciate the distinction between sincerity and authenticity, where sincerity is a more subjective attitude. It's a matter of being honest and expressing your true feelings and intent and position as you perceive it, whereas authenticity can be more objectively observed and evaluated. So, for example, I can tell you that I wake up every morning feeling like P. Diddy. And I'm 100% sincere because I really do feel that way. Now, whether there's actually any valid, significant comparison between a frumpy, middle-aged white girl anthropologist and Sean Combs, arguably one of the most successful artists and entrepreneurs of our time, that is a conversation about authenticity, but not about sincerity. Do you remember Holden Caulfield in Catcher in the Rye and what he disparaged more than anything? Phonies, right? And he was onto something because there are fakers among us. There are people who are indeed not sincere or are just so deluded that they don't notice the disconnect between image and essence in themselves. But for the most part, most of us are sincere people. And our challenge is not in being sincere, it's in being authentic. It's in making decisions and behaving in ways that align with the vision we have of ourselves and having a life and work that aligns with our vision for the world. One of the things that I admire most about the young people I work with is that this very keen, critical eye they have for inauthenticity focuses most sharply on themselves. They hold themselves to such a high standard of authenticity. It is not enough for them. They are not satisfied. They are not content to know that they are in the world making a sincere effort to do good. It's not enough. They want to know, and they want to know how to know the real consequences, intended and otherwise, of their actions. There may be more than one road to hell, but I can assure you that you will not be finding today's youth generation on the one that's paved with good intentions. So the second thing that I've learned from the students I work with is that the dichotomy between continuity and change makes no sense. Sometimes we have to change in order to stay the same. In a complex, dynamic environment, we have to adapt in order to sustain stability, right? This is a very basic principle of biological evolution, and I find it to be really helpful in understanding culture as well. Sometimes things have to change in order to stay the same. Now, very often, a youth generation behaves differently or advocates change. And a parent generation perceives this as a rejection of their values. But so often, isn't it true that from the young person's point of view, they are expressing the same values? They are just innovating new ways, more relevant ways, more authentic ways of expressing those same values. I find this really helpful in my work with organizations as well, when so often we are challenged to decide collectively what is so important to us, what's so important to who we are, that we want it to continue into the future. We want it to stay the same. And then, therefore, what is it about ourselves that we must change in order to maintain that precious priority? Sometimes we have to change in order to stay the same. And this, my students, is why I harp so much on critical thinking. Because the quality of the decisions we make about what must change in order to keep what's most important the same has everything to do with the ability, the richness, the sharpness of our analysis of this complex, dynamic environment that's demanding the adaptation. So, finally, I'm inspired and exasperated by the fact that authenticity is always on the move. If authenticity is about aligning substance with image, about aligning outcome and intent, then in our rapidly complex, changing world, the quest for authenticity is endless, right? I mean, as soon as we establish something authentic, we have to begin adapting in order to keep it that way. But adaptation is what the youth generation does best. It's not only their talent, it's not only their proclivity, it's their job. It's their job to pull our communities into the future by making the changes necessary, by innovating the changes that have to be innovated in order to continue with what matters most. It's their job, and they're good at it. So, young people, we need you. We need you to lead us. We need you to unite us. And we need you to keep us innovating so that we can keep it real. Thank you.